I am Colby Sumner, and this is America, Fog of War.
Pride of our nation, this day have set upon a mighty endeavor, a struggle to preserve our republic. Men's souls will be shaken with the violences of...
The cost of freedom is always high, but Americans have always paid it. And one path we shall never choose, and that is the path of surrender.
I can hear you! I can hear you! The rest of the world hears you! And the people who knock these buildings down will hear all of it.
We're told that on his body was found a diary. Under the heading, My Pledge, he had written these words: America must win this war. Therefore, I will work, I will save, I will sacrifice, I will endure.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us again for another Hip Pocket History. I am Colby Sumner, and as always, I am joined by my co-host Brett Thomas. How you doing, buddy?
Doing all right. Glad to be back with Midway here after Coral Sea.
I know, man. So much to talk about,
Yes.
and we're going to get to tie some things in from the Battle of Coral Sea into this story, but really, in a lot of people's eyes, this battle is the turning point in the war in the Pacific.
Yep.
Everything up to this point, the Japanese have been winning and winning and pushing, and then from this point on, they're pretty much on their heels till the end of the war. Is how people view this battle. What's really interesting is it boils down to one specific area of this battle, which we're going to get into later.
Yeah.
But there's a lot to break down, a lot to talk about. There's a lot of moving parts. Again, just like Coral Sea, it's a little more straightforward, not as confusing as the Battle of Coral Sea. So we'll try to paint as vivid a picture as possible without making it too confusing.
Yep.
But let's pick up in the aftermath of the Battle of the Coral Sea. And again, we know that we lost a aircraft carrier, and the Yorktown was severely damaged and was able to limp back to Pearl Harbor.
Yes.
The Japanese have two aircraft carrier
Damaged severely.
Severely damaged. Now, not sunk. They have one that's sunk, but that's a light carrier, not a battle carrier. All that to be said, that the strategy that the Japanese is trying to push here is twofold. One, they're trying to cut off supply routes to Australia because that's how we're going to be able to conduct the war throughout the Pacific. The other is they are trying to push us, the U.S., back to the west coast of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
If they can get to a place to where they can take control of the Hawaiian Islands, occupy the Hawaiian Islands, and push us back to the west coast of the United States, the war is going to be that much harder for us to pursue. We have such a greater distance to. I mean, we talked about from Hawaii to Japan is. What is 6 times or 16?
Yeah,
6 times.
Yeah.
6 times bigger than London to Berlin.
Yeah.
Well, how much bigger is it if you make it from the West Coast to Japan?
Yeah, all the way bigger.
So from San Francisco to Japan, I wonder how far that is. You're talking about one of the most vast areas on the planet. And they're going to put everything they have into this. Their goal is to take the island of Midway Atoll, which is really two islands. There's Eastern Island and Sand Island, and they're positioned right next to each other. Eastern Island has an airstrip on it, and they want that airstrip. They want to be able to conduct air raids from that airstrip to the Hawaiian Islands. Now, they come up with a very complicated plan. As we talked about in the last episode, the Japanese have this approach to naval warfare where they make very complicated plans and they like to split their forces up. But essentially, you're looking at like a three-pronged attack, kind of, where you have a diversionary force that's going to go up towards the Aleutian Islands near Alaska to kind of divert our forces, or their goal was to divert our forces away from Midway.
Mm-hmm.
Then they would have a carrier task force strike the island and then the main invasion force is sailing behind them. And once that force got there, they would obviously make landfall, invade the island, take control of it. Well, what the Japanese did not know is the Americans had a trick up their sleeve. They had an ace in the hole. If
Practicing
you will.
for a little bit.
So on the Hawaiian Islands, there is a code breaking organization called HIPPO, right? And it's in this facility, this bunker, deep within one of the islands. All the members there are all the members of this organization are sequestered. They stay there and they work nonstop to break the Japanese operational codes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, remember, we said beginning with the Battle of Coral Sea that they hadn't cracked the code, but they had enough of it broken where they could get little pieces.
Yeah,
Okay.
the operational portion.
At this point, they're getting a little better at it, and they're starting to really get a lot more of a vivid picture of what's going on. And they're able to decipher that there is going to be a major attack coming. They just can't figure out exactly where. And part of what's a problem with this is, you're talking about a code system that has 50,000 numerical possibilities, right?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, 50,000 5-digit numerical possibilities that they have to decipher. I saw a lecture online where the guy said it's like trying to figure out the world's most complicated Rubik's Cube, right?
Yeah.
Like it's just insanely difficult.
Probably like on a chalkboard too, with
Right.
boxes like
Right. So
put it all out.
they've been working diligently at this, but they have the location. They know it's going to be the location of the attack. The code for the Japanese are using is AF, and they cannot figure out where exactly AF is.
Mm-hmm.
So they come up with this scheme at HIPPO that Midway Island is going to send out a not coded message saying that they're having problems with their water purification system on the island,
Okay.
and see what the Japanese do with it, right? Almost like a game of telephone,
Yeah.
Like, let's see how the message gets picked up. So they send this message out, and they sit back and wait. And eventually, the Japanese send through their coded message that AF is having water problems. So they know now it's Midway. We're for sure it's Midway. Now, that's not the end of the difficulty.
Interesting.
Because they're not the only code-breaking facility that the U.S. is employing. There's also a sister facility in Washington, D.C., and all the information that they come up with pretty much goes against everything that the Hawaiian HIPPO organization is coming up with. They're always countering each other from different spectrums. One says it's going to be here, the other one says it's going to be here. Well, Admiral Chester Nimitz, thank God he made the right call, but he puts his faith in the guys in Hawaii at HIPPO.
Yeah.
And he decides that he's going to take two carrier task forces. That's Task Force 17, which this is the Yorktown, which, if you remember, the Yorktown was severely damaged at the Battle of Coral Sea, is sent back to Pearl Harbor. And when it gets there, the mechanic crews are saying it's going to take at least a month to get this thing seaworthy again. And Nimitz says, I need it in 3 days.
Oh, that's a big difference.
Right? So get to work.
Overtime.
And lo and behold, these guys do it. I don't know how they do it, but they get that thing freaking seaworthy in 3 days' time.
724.
There's a picture online, and I
Everybody's
highly
just getting
recommend everybody go and look, of the hole that is in the flight deck. And it goes down like 4 stories. The fact that they were able to get that thing repaired where aircraft could take off and land on it is just beyond me. I don't know how they managed that, but they do. So now you have Task Force 17, which has the Yorktown, and then Task Force 16, which has 2 carriers, the Enterprise and the Hornet. And Task Force 17 is commanded by, he's going to command the entire operation, but the task force itself is commanded by Admiral Fletcher, who was the commanding admiral at the Battle of the Coral Sea, if you remember.
Yeah.
Admiral Bull Halsey is who is in charge of Task Force 16 with the Enterprise and the Hornet.
Mhm.
But Admiral Halsey has some kind of skin rash or some kind of condition come up where he's severely ill.
Really?
And Nimitz, realizes that he's not going to be up for the big fight, so he makes the last minute call to bench Halsey, and he puts Admiral Spruance in command of Task Force 16, with overall command of the operation going to Admiral Fletcher, the commander of Task Force 17.
Yeah.
Well, those 2 carrier task forces are going to sail northwest out of the Hawaiian Islands, and they're going to place themselves northeast of Midway because the Japanese are coming from the west. So the idea is that because you have the landing strip on Midway Island, reconnaissance aircraft can take off from there. They have a range of like 700 and something miles. It's ridiculous how far these aircraft can go. But they will be able to see the Japanese fleet before the Japanese fleet can see the American fleet because the American fleet is further back and northeast of Midway Island, right?
That's cool.
So it's like they have this extra arm element that, obviously the Japanese know that Midway Island is there. That's going to be no surprise. That's what they're coming to hit. But, the 2 American task forces are going to be far enough out of range that no Japanese reconnaissance aircraft will be able to see that they're there.
That's interesting. So because of the use of these code breakers, they're able to determine that the Northern Fleet up the Aleutian Islands is they're not going to send any ships or anything up there.
They know that's a ploy.
They know that's a ploy. The main force is coming this way.
They got bigger problems, and they really do have bigger problems coming from Midway because there's going to be 4, not 2 this time, but 4 battle aircraft carriers, Japanese battle aircraft carriers heading for Midway Island.
Yeah.
So it's, the numbers are stacked in the Japanese favor.
Right.
But the Americans have a clearer view of the battlefield. And if you know what your enemy's doing and you can move first and you can keep them on their heels and make them reactionary to whatever you want to have happen on the battlefield, you have the momentum, right? The ball is in your court. So that sets us up. Where do we go? How does this take off? We get the 2 task forces in position, and what happens?
Yeah. So before I start with that, a question I never thought about before is like, if this island is so important to the Japanese right now, how come 6 months prior, or maybe even 7 months now, that they only shelled the island? Like on Pearl Harbor Day, they shelled it, but they never invaded. They could have taken it earlier, just like they take other islands.
I think this is just me speculating here, but I believe the reason is they wanted to take Wake Island first, right?
Yeah,
because Wake Island is
sense.
Closer.
Yeah,
right. Because Midway is more north of Hawaii,
closer.
whereas Wake is west of Hawaii, more towards Japan.
Okay, that makes sense.
But who knows? Who knows? I know they wanted both islands. But who knows really? We could probably figure out the answer, but we were so busy trying to figure out this battle.
Definitely.
It's out of our wheelhouse, this battle. This took a little extra time and resources to research than we normally do.
Yeah. So the official battle, June 4th to the 7th, 1942. However, we're going to start with the day before on the June 3rd. So PBY Catalinas and scouting patrols out of Midway, obviously they're going to discover the Japanese invasion force southwest of the atoll. Now, throughout the day, they're going to have additional sightings as well, but they're never going to actually see the carrier force of the Japanese there. Now, stationed on the base is B-17s, numerous B-17s, PBY Catalinas, and a few other planes as well, maybe some Avengers that haven't been used yet, but these pilots and these planes, they're going to harass the Japanese fleet. So the B-17s, they're going to come in, like they take off from Midway, they're going to launch and attack from about 20,000 feet, maybe more. And when they drop their bombs, obviously the Japanese Navy is able to evade, any damages or any issues. Nothing hits. The PBYs, same thing. Turned around by anti-aircraft fire. And so it's really not, it's effective. Everything's effective, obviously, because they're doing it, and it stalls the fleet maybe a little bit. But, of course, the Japanese are still making their way. Now, that night of the 3rd, 4 PBY Catalinas, they're carrying these Mark 13 dud torpedoes. Half of them are duds, half of them are working or whatever. They actually conduct the first nighttime raid against surface ships, and they come in at night and they launch torpedoes, but there's no there's no effect. I'm not sure if they hit anything or
Well, let's put
damaged
that into
anything.
perspective. I mean, if you think about that, there's no night vision capability,
Dude,
right?
no.
They barely have instrument capability. You know,
Right.
so you're trying to not only you're trying to locate the Japanese fleet at night in the ocean where there's no city glow.
Yeah, no.
You know, the Japanese aren't running lights on their ships, I'm pretty sure. You know, not at nighttime, not in a wartime environment. You're trying not to crash into the other planes that are flying with you.
Yep.
And then you're trying to dive bomb at nighttime with no night vision devices.
Oh no, these are torpedo guys. They're
I'm sorry. You're trying to.
They're coming in
which
low.
is even more dangerous because you got to get 150 feet off the deck.
Yeah.
Right. At nighttime. Oof, man. I tell you what, I'd be a nervous Nancy doing that job.
I would be too. But the Japanese are probably also nervous as hell too. Like, what the heck's going on? Like, what are these guys
Attacking us at
doing?
night.
Yeah, they're doing this at nighttime. So anyway, these guys, they continue on. They repel this assault from Midway. And by that next morning on June 4th, 4 a.m., Japanese launch 108 aircraft.
And it's important
into
to
the
point
air.
out that probably one of the motivations as to why they're launching so early is because the Japanese commander, that carrier task force commander, knows that Midway knows that there's carriers en route.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's not going to be a surprise anymore, so we better get this battle underway.
Yeah, they were just attacking the crap out of them. So, yeah, so anyway, Japanese launch planes, and that's about 4 o'clock. By the time they get up in the air, make their way, they're bombing Midway Island by 6:30 in the morning. Unfortunately, the Marines there are going to take very heavy losses. The Japanese, their whole goal was to like hit the island, soften it up a little bit, and also not hit the runway because their goal is to acquire that
They
runway.
want to use it. They want to use
Yeah,
it.
they want to use it immediately.
Now, one thing to point out, because of hypo and knowing about this attack ahead of time, and then locating that Japanese carrier task force, there's pretty much no American aircraft on the ground when this happens.
Yeah.
They were all able to scramble and get up in the air.
Right. Yeah.
So
Everybody's on high alert.
just to put that into perspective, what the targets that the Japanese are actually taking out, the hangars and the repair stations, I guess is for lack of a better term, for aircraft, all these things that they're hitting, they don't really matter because there's no aircraft in them.
Yeah.
Right? All the aircraft are up in the air. The things that would have mattered, like the runway, they're not hitting.
Right. Yep. So these guys, like you're saying, are airborne. They attack by so that was 6:30. By 7:10, 30, 40 minutes later, they're also attacking the Japanese fleet, from the air, like these B-17s. These
All
guys
the
are
aircraft
scrambled.
from Midway.
Yeah. By the end of the attack on Midway Island itself, everybody kind of becomes more aware of what's going on in the area. Japanese forces become aware of American naval forces in the area, but not the carrier forces yet.
They just don't know the
surface
whole
ships.
picture. They know something's going on. They don't know the whole picture.
Yeah, so they're realizing there's a lot going on now.
Well, they also realize too. This is the Japanese carrier task force, that their first attack wasn't extremely successful on Midway Island.
Right.
So the admiral, the Japanese task force admiral, has a very difficult decision to make. Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of America Fog of War. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please make sure you subscribe to the channel and leave us a 5-star review. It goes a long way in helping us out and getting this show out to other people. If you're watching on YouTube, please make sure you give this video a like. Also, subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you stay up to date on all of our latest content. If you're looking for more of America Fog of War or just a way to help the show out, then please consider becoming a member over at our Patreon. For just $5 a month, you get early ad-free access to all of our content, as well as numerous other benefits, and it goes a long way in helping us maintain, honor, and uphold the legacy of the American warrior. Thank you so much, and as always, stay frosty. Does he arm up his aircraft to be able to counter a U.S. aircraft carrier with torpedoes? Because he had aircraft in reserve armed with torpedoes in case that inevitability, or in case that outcome happened, right?
Yeah.
In case they run into an American aircraft carrier, he had planes ready to drop torpedoes on them.
Makes sense.
Because he rearmed those aircraft with bombs so they can bomb Midway and have a more successful bombing campaign for the future invasion that they're ultimately there to have, right? That they're working towards. The Japanese admiral decides to call for a second air bombardment of Midway Island.
Okay.
So all those aircraft that are still on the aircraft carrier that are held in reserve, he orders that their torpedoes be removed and that they be rearmed with bombs so they can drop bombs on the island, right?
Yeah.
But he does that to his detriment.
Yeah. Yeah, because now we know they're there, and American aircraft carriers are preparing to launch now, immediately. So when American forces begin to launch their counteroffensive against that first Midway strike, there's a guy by the name of Lieutenant Commander John C. Waldron. This guy is like gung-ho. He wants, no matter what, hit these ships,
Mission
sink
first.
them.
Mission first.
Mission first. It's kind of like duty before safety mindset, and that's kind of what wins battles in this kind of space. Now, in the prior to the battle and the training and everything he was speaking with for his squadron, it's always, we got to hit, we got to hit, we got to hit, we got to hit. This is ingrained in his soul and in his guys. So that morning, the pilots on the Hornet, they're ready. They're in the room. They're ready to go, and they're getting their debrief. And they find a message from Waldron, and it says, quote, "My greatest hope is that we encounter a favorable tactical situation, but if we don't, and the worst comes to the worst, I want each of us to do his utmost to destroy our enemies. If there is only one plane left to make a final run, I want that man to go in and get a hit. May God be with us all. Good luck, happy landings, and give him hell." End quote.
So let's talk about this a little bit, because the torpedo bombers, there's a few things that we need to hit on before we move on with the story. First and foremost, the torpedo bombers and the torpedoes that they're armed with.
Mm-hmm.
They are
crap.
The aircraft themselves are slow. The torpedoes that they're using, 40% of them are duds.
Yeah.
And then the remaining 60%, a lot of the times they don't hit the water correctly. They'll nose down too deep, or they'll nose up too high and hit the surface and then sputter out. There's problems with these torpedoes.
You got to be close.
That they haven't evaluated yet. After this battle, they will evaluate them and realize they need to make some serious changes. It's also important to point out that after this battle, these particular torpedo bombers will never be used in combat again.
Yeah, actually, so it's the Devastator they're flying now. And before this, they actually got Avengers, and they wanted to use them, or they were asking for Avengers. I don't know if the Avengers were back on Hawaii still, and other units were training. But this guy, Waldron, was like, I don't want them there. I want them on the ship. I want them here now so we can use them. But they didn't get them. So they're flying the old Avengers that were about to be phased out.
Yeah. So they're going into combat with less than desirable tools of warfare,
yes,
to put it mildly. Another thing that we should point out is that in a minute here, Fletcher, because the reason you tell this story is because Fletcher, the commander of the American task forces in the Battle of Midway, is getting ready to give the command to launch aircraft to attack the Japanese.
Mm-hmm.
He orders Spruance, as soon as practicable, launch your aircraft, seek out the enemy, get some sink some ships. Yeah. And he's going to do the same. Initially, he holds his aircraft in reserve, but it's not long after that he decides, I'm going to launch mine also. We know where they're at. We're going to go get them. Now, it's important to point out that just because Fletcher is in overall command, that means he has strategical overall command. So he can give the order that I want you to go attack them, but the how is up to Spruance.
Right.
Because Spruance is in charge of Task Force 16, which has, again, the aircraft carrier Enterprise and the aircraft carrier Hornet and all their aircraft that are on board. He's in charge of those. So tactically, he gets to employ those how he sees fit. Well, Spruance was not at the Battle of Coral Sea, whereas Fletcher was. And the way they launched their aircraft is going to very much paint the picture to how experience in combat works. Now, that being said, things work out positively for the Americans. You could argue that Spruance doing things the way he did saves the day. But again, a lot of his pilots are going to sacrifice,
At a big cost,
pay the
yeah.
ultimate price because of this decision. But when Spruance launches his aircraft, he tells them, as soon as you get in the air, go find the target.
Yeah.
When Fletcher launches his aircraft from the Yorktown, because he was at the Battle of Coral Sea and saw how piecemeal attacks with aircraft would work out, he tells them, wait until you're in a cohesive formation, go attack together. Right?
Yep.
You think about some of the episodes we've done on the Civil War, because this comes up time and time again in the Civil War. You have certain commanders, like at the Battle of Fredericksburg, for instance. The American forces, the Union forces, are sent into the battle piecemeal. That's like one brigade at a time, and they get devastated.
Yeah.
Now, the American forces there had way more troops than the Confederacy did. If they were to launch a big bulk attack all together, all working in tandem, they probably would have won the day. It would have been a very costly battle, but they probably would have taken the field. But because they attack piecemeal, they get leveled, right?
Makes sense.
Well, Spruance has just sent his aircraft into the battle piecemeal. And unfortunately, the ones that are going to get into the fight first are the slowest and least equipped for battle, the torpedo bombers.
Yeah, terrible shame. So one other thing to add to that is Waldron, he's speaking with the command, and they want launch planes and fly southwest. That's where they believe the fleet to be. He wants to go directly west. And they say, well, no, you're not doing that. So in any case, he follows his orders, even though he doesn't want to. Somehow he turns out to be right. It's a weird thing happens, but of course, so the pilots, they man their planes. So we know Midway was struck at 6:30 a.m. and now it's 7:02. It's our turn to get airborne. And so the Hornet, they begin launching, and in this order, it's 35 dive bombers followed up by 15 torpedo bombers and 10 fighters. The dive bombers and the fighters, they fly at greater altitudes. The torpedo bombers, they're much slower and bulkier. They take from the lower altitudes their course of action here. And, of course, at the same time, the Yorktown and the Enterprise are launching planes at this same moment. And, but like anything, it takes a long time to get each squadron up into the air. So it's not like they launch at 7:02. They're in the air.
And the Yorktown is going to be a little bit behind both those other aircraft carriers, because initially Fletcher holds them in reserve.
Yes.
It's not long after, but it's shortly after he decides to send them into the air. But there will be a little bit of a gap between the Hornet and the Enterprise's aircraft and the Yorktown's aircraft.
Yeah. Which is good. It makes sense, they got to coordinate their stuff too. And so, but in any case, so they're up in the air. Now, by 9 o'clock, Japanese scout planes spot the Yorktown. And so they know there's one American carrier out there. And because they spot the Yorktown, Japanese fleet slightly changes course, because now they're anticipating how they're going to take out this one carrier. Now, Waldron, at the same time, these guys are all in the air. He changes course. He's going to say, okay, I'm far enough away from my chain of command now. Follow me. We're going to go this way.
And something important to point out there, that is a very pivotal moment, because like you had mentioned, that they had the dive bombers and the fighters that were with them.
Yeah.
Same with the Enterprise as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's about that time that the majority of that air wing, the dive bombers and the fighters, end up turning south and heading for Midway Island in search of this Japanese fleet. For whatever reason, Waldron is the only one that decides to swing north.
Yes. Yep. And because of that, now this is by 9:25. They're going to Torpedo Squadron 8, they're going to see three carrier groups, and they're going to radio this enemy position up. But for whatever reason, bouncing off of other scout planes in the area or whatever, this message doesn't get relayed to the other squadrons that were, going in different directions, like you said. So asking for the Hornet, other squadrons to assist, they never get it. And he decides, we're going to attack immediately without fighters. We're going in. So they were all spread out in their search, as they're coming along. So now they're tightening back up into their attack formations, and they're approaching the enemy ships. Now, initially they had gone towards one carrier, but they were taking so much flak and anti-aircraft that they diverted and decided, well, let's go to hit the other carrier too instead. Now, I broke this down because these guys are flying at 60 feet above the ocean. And at about 16,000 yards out, Japanese Zeros from above and behind, they descend upon Waldron and his men. There's 15 planes. Now, 16,000 yards is 9 miles out from the targets. 9 miles out is less than 3 minutes. It sounds like a lot. It's really not a lot. So here they go. 30 Zeros descend upon 15. Now, Waldron and his wingmen immediately, like to his left and right, they're immediately hit and go down. He's on the hook, trying to get, these guys are trying to go in. Now, they got to get through the first barrier. The first barrier is the cruisers and destroyers around the carriers. And they got the anti-air, the Zeros behind them and diving in on them. And then once they get to a certain point, they're receiving the anti-aircraft fire from the destroyers. Out of the 15, only 6 of them make it past that
first
barrier. And now their next goal is the carriers. Well, within minutes, those 6 planes are shot down with one remaining. One guy. He comes in there. Now, first, I got to say, Waldron was last seen standing in the cockpit. I guess he was standing up, getting ready to jump, bail out. But coming in at 60 feet,
you don't have much time.
Yeah, he hit the water, and unfortunately, he did not survive this ordeal. Now, the last remaining pilot, George Gay, he's going to press the attack, just as stated in the quote I said from Waldron earlier. He's the last man, and he has it in his mind, I'm going to press this attack. His rear gunner in the back of his plane is shot and killed. He's alone. He's completely alone. Now, within about 800 yards, Gay is going to drop his torpedo. Target, I don't know which ship it was, but one of the carriers. There's a little bit of speculation. He thought it was one ship, and historians are saying it's another now. In any event, he drops his torpedo. He gets up over this aircraft carrier and flies directly over it, but his torpedo does not make its mark.
Whether it's a dud or
whether it's a dud or anything, there's no nothing to come of it, whether it missed or not. In any event, he's going to be shot down, and he's going to have a bullet he's going to have shrapnel in his left leg and a bullet in his left arm. When he's shot down, he's only a quarter mile from this carrier group. And of the 15 Devastator crews that made up Torpedo Squadron 8, he is the lone survivor, and now he's in the water. So, these guys, it's just unbelievable to think about.
Well, it's crazy to think that in Waldron's speech, he says, if there's only one of you left, still go to the target and drop your torpedo. And that's exactly how it played out.
What happened. It's crazy. That's how it happened. But that's what happened that's what happens. Now, there's going to be other squadrons that do something similar, but.
Right. VT6 from the Enterprise will have a very similar fate. They're going to show up 15 minutes later and attempt the same thing. They're going to be by themselves with no fighter escorts. Yeah. And they're pretty much going to get 8 to pieces as well. I think there's 2 aircraft that survived that attack. Maybe a few more.
Couple, not many.
But out of the 16 or however many aircraft that they go in with, they have a fraction remaining. And none of their torpedoes have an effect on target.
It's a terrible shame.
But in the grand scheme of things, to them it probably did seem like an ultimate failure, but it was actually a very important occurrence in the battle. Yeah. And it's probably what is going to contribute most to this pivotal moment that we're getting ready to talk about. But as we had mentioned before, the Japanese admiral had decided to take the torpedoes off of his planes that he had in reserve.
Yes.
Right? And rearm them with bombs so that he can make another air assault on Midway Island. Well, when these aircraft show up, he realizes now, holy crap, there is an American aircraft carrier in the area. I got to do something for that. Right? Yeah. So he tells them to halt changing, go back go back and rearm those same aircraft with torpedoes. But they're doing this fast.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have torpedoes and bombs all over the hangar decks on these aircraft carriers. They're not in the armory on the ship, right? Where they would be, armories on ships, they have extra protection against fire, against impact. They're armored. They're protected so that you don't get an explosion and have a real devastating day on an aircraft carrier. Well, because they're doing all this, there's fuel hoses all over the place. There's torpedoes. There's bombs. They're all just loose goose out on the hangar deck.
Some of them are still receiving planes back from Midway, and the fighters that are still up, they're trying to receive planes as well.
They're trying to do all this stuff. They can't. And on top of that, the Zeros that have been engaging all these torpedo bombers are now running out of fuel and ammo. Right?
Yep.
A lot of people will make the case that they are down low because they're trying to attack these torpedo bombers, but there is a 20-minute gap between the last torpedo bombers coming in and what we're getting ready to talk about. So, and a Zero can climb to altitude much quicker than that.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that plays in as much, but what this attack by VT-8 and VT-6 does do is it delays the Japanese fleet from being able to counterattack an American aircraft carrier for 40 minutes.
It's a long time.
It's a long time, and it's precious time.
Because our guys are already in the air still.
Right, because now you still have the Yorktown's dive bombers and their Scout aircraft carrier, and the Enterprise's dive bombers as well. Yep. The Hornets dive bombers and Scout planes had turned down towards Midway, and they won't re-enter this part of the battle. This part of the battle will be, the remainder of it will be fought by pilots from the Yorktown and the Enterprise.
I think hey might be a better idea to start. Hey, thanks for watching our show. If you're looking to get more out of America... Here we go. Hey, thanks for tuning in to America Fog of... Hey, thanks for watching our show. If you're looking to get more out of America Fog of War, or if you're trying to get more of America Fog or are looking... Hey, thanks for tuning into our show. If you are looking to get more from America Fog of War, or are looking for a way to help us, or you're just looking to help... No, just. Recut. If you're trying to get... If you want more content from America Fog of War, or you're looking for a way to support the show, consider becoming a Patreon. Wait, a Patreon? It's a patron. Instead of consider becoming a Patreon, consider joining our Patreon. Okay. For just $5 a month, you can... For just $5 a month, you can submit questions to be answered on air. Log into a monthly Zoom call with either Colby or myself to discuss related topics, to discuss U.S. military history or any topic related to it, and gain early ad-free access to all of our content. And gain early ad-free content to all of our content. And gain early ad-free content to all of our access content. And gain... Redo. Visit patreon.com/America Fog of War or click the link in our description and help us to maintain the legacy... to help us honor the legacy of the American warrior. Hey, I'm not that good at this. If you like the show, join the Patreon for $5 a month. Thank you.
But like we had mentioned before, Fletcher had commanded his aircraft from the Yorktown to wait until they were in a cohesive formation to go find the enemy. And when they leave, they head almost directly for the fleet. As earlier we were talking about the Hornet and the Enterprise, their aircraft seem to go southwest and then have to swing back north.
Right.
The Yorktown's aircraft doesn't do that. And the first element in this Yorktown group is going to be their torpedo bombers as well. And they're going to have a very similar fate to the other torpedo groups that have already hit this
Bomberman
fleet, right? They're going to lose a ton of aircraft. They're going to have no effects on target, but they're keeping those Japanese Zeros occupied still. And all the time that they're attacking, the Japanese fleet is having to maneuver, like make defensive maneuvers. They can't get into the wind so that they can launch more aircraft, and they can't receive those aircraft that are in the air that are running out of fuel and ammo, right? So it's keeping them in a stalemate for the time being. Now, that's at 10 a.m. 15 minutes before that, you're going to have the first step in the perfect storm when it comes to the outcome for the Japanese. You know, you've seen that movie, The Perfect Storm, when it's three storms combined to make this monster storm. You're about to have 3 air groups combined to make a monster attack on this Japanese fleet, this carrier fleet task force. And we had mentioned earlier that the torpedo bombers, while flying southwest, swung north. You had the torpedo bombers under Waldron, who came from the Hornet, did that. The Enterprise torpedo bombers, VT-6, did that as well. They swung north as well. They did it a little early. Well, behind them, because again, they're all launched in piecemeal. So the Enterprise's dive bombers and scout craft, which are their scout aircraft, which are gonna work as dive bombers essentially as well. They end up swinging north, but they're still searching. They can't find the carrier fleet, the Japanese carrier fleet. And then all of a sudden they look down and they see wake from a Japanese destroyer, and they follow that Japanese destroyer all the way to the aircraft carrier fleet.
Brilliant.
And as soon as they show up on scene, the Yorktown's dive bombers and scout aircraft simultaneously show up on the scene. So you have 3 air wings that are showing up on scene, coming from 20,000 feet, getting ready to wreak havoc on the Japanese.
From both sides, pretty much.
From both sides. You have one group coming in from basically the Japanese, the southwest of the Japanese, and one coming in straight from the east of the Japanese, right? So they're kind of hammer and anvil almost, coming in from 2 different directions.
Good.
Now, the Yorktown's aircraft, that's going to be VB-6 and VS-6. The way they come in, the 2 aircraft carriers that are going to be closest to them are going to be the Kaga and the Akagi. On board the Akagi is the torpedo air wing that attacked Pearl Harbor. They're veterans. They're very experienced. They're probably the best pilots in the Japanese Navy. So big target. If those guys get in the air and are able to go attack, either the Enterprise, the Hornet, or the Yorktown, it's going to be a bad day for any of those aircraft carriers, because the Japanese torpedoes are extremely effective, whereas ours are duds most of the time.
Right.
So typically, when you have 2 air wings come in simultaneously to drop bombs on an enemy fleet, the first air wing will typically take the furthest aircraft carrier away. The second air wing will take the closest. That way, they can be hit simultaneously. Air defenses are a little harder to single out one or the other because it's happening at the same time. Well, there's a failure in communication. It might be the fog of war. Who knows? But essentially, both air wings, VB-6 and VS-6, dive on the Kaga. And the Kaga is going to get smoked. It's for sure gets hit with 3 bombs, possibly 5. It is just ravaged, right? I mean, that thing, they dropped so many bombs on that thing, there's no way it's going to make it. Lieutenant Best, he is in command of VB-6, which are dive bombers from the USS Enterprise. He and his 2 wingmen are going to peel off. He sees what's happening and goes, well, that ship is already taken care of. I'm going to go take out the Akagi. My sights are now on the Akagi. And him and 2 other aircraft are going to make their way by themselves towards the Akagi, and they're going to be flying through crazy anti-aircraft fire. They're going to dive super close to the ship. Typically, I think they come down at a 70-degree angle. They start at 20,000 feet. They dive to like 1,500 feet. I think he's going to even get lower than that. I think he's going to get to like 1,000 feet. He's going to really cut it close because he wants to ensure that bomb is accurate. Right? This is their only shot. They're the only 3 aircraft.
Yeah, just the 3 of them. Wow.
All 3 of them will drop their bombs. The 2 wingmen's bombs will impact the water, but it impacts the water close enough to do some damage to the ship. Lieutenant Best When he drops his bomb, it smacks the middle of the flight deck,
Nice.
penetrates, and he doesn't know it, but that's a fatal wound for that ship.
Wow. So effective, hey.
Simultaneously, VB3, which is from the Yorktown, and that is under the command of a guy named Leslie, are going to attack the Soryu, and they're going to get 3 hits on the Soryu as well. So within a matter of 5 minutes, this whole encounter takes about 5 minutes.
Wow.
They have just taken out 3, not 1, not 2, but 3 Japanese aircraft carriers, because all 3 of those ships will sink. Like I'd mentioned before, you have all these torpedoes and bombs and fuel hoses, all just loose goose on the hangar deck. So when these bombs impact, there's secondary and tertiary fires and explosions going off. They can't stop the fires. So eventually they have to scuttle all these ships.
Makes sense.
Right? So that's 3 aircraft carrier down in a matter of 5 minutes.
That's amazing because the hour before that saw American wave after wave just get decimated. And the Japanese probably thought they had this in the bag. And then now this happens.
Oh, you know, they
Totally.
probably felt so confident after the torpedo attacks, like, oh man, we got this. We
And then all
got
this
this.
craziness is going on.
And little did they know they had a bad day coming their way.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. So
We have a firsthand account of this 5 minutes taking place. It's from a pilot named Dusty Cleese. He was a pilot from the Enterprise, and targeting the Kaga. He targeted the Kaga. That's the first aircraft carrier that was hit. It was hit with 3, possibly 5 bombs.
okay.
One of his bombs, or one of the bombs that hit it, that we
Epic.
know that hit it.
Epic.
And this is what he had to say. Quote, I used the red circle on the bow as my target, and I came really down low to make sure that it would hit. And I saw the bomb land at the edge of that big red circle, and then I saw a big explosion, end quote.
That's pretty cool. What a way to aim at something.
Yeah, I mean, I've
the
heard
rising sun.
him say that. They have a recording of him saying that.
Yeah.
And to hear him say it, man, you can almost hear the excitement in his voice. Like, still to this, I mean, he's an old man giving this quote. You know,
like
he's
70 some years later.
It's been a long time ago for him, and you can still hear like, well, it'd be like us talking about our first time in a gunfight. You know, like you can hear like that excitement in his voice. Like, this is what I was aiming at, and I was going to hit it. You know, and then I saw it hit it, and it blew up. And sure enough, it hit that circle. You can hear him. I highly recommend looking up Dusty Cleese. His story is pretty incredible. But you know, these guys are young, and the pilots from the Enterprise are all brand new, inexperienced, never been in combat. The Yorktown guys have been in combat, but they've only been in one battle. Right? Granted, it was a big battle, but they've only been in one.
Yeah.
Right? You don't have the same level of expertise you're going to have in 1944 or 1945. Right? This is early in the war. These guys are all fresh.
Yeah, for sure.
And they're participating in the most epic naval battle in our history.
Yeah,
and they're winning.
Never done, and they're winning. That's
you know,
important.
like and he's in that group that really changed the tide. It's pretty fascinating.
So that is a humongous victory so far for the Americans. That is tremendous to cause that much devastation in just a short period of time.
If the battle ended right there, that's still a huge victory.
Oh yeah, yes.
You know?
But in any event, it takes 2 to tango, and they're still going. So there's one carrier remaining, the Hiryu, and this ship, just prior to 11 o'clock, they're going to launch 2 waves against our American carriers this time. Now, the first wave, they're going to be spotted some 55 miles out from the Yorktown. So I didn't do the math on this one, but, you know, probably just off the top of my head, less than 10 minutes out. These guys are coming in. Now, the first wave they encounter are going to be dive bombers, and they were intercepted by fighters from the Yorktown as well as fighters from the Enterprise. However, with this ability to, same thing, try to knock these guys out of the sky, they're still going to make hits on the Yorktown. Now, some of these aircraft are going to be shot down by cruisers and destroyers in the area, but the Yorktown's going to take 3 major bomb hits. It damages the boilers below deck. She kind of comes dead in the water. The crew on board the Yorktown, which they're I think not used to this, but have experience with this. They're going to do everything that they can to fight these fires. They're trying to save their ship. Now, by this time, they had been able to produce enough steam to get the ship back in motion. So Yorktown, she's still moving, but here comes the second wave of Japanese bombers approaching. This time they're torpedo planes, and they're going to launch massive hits and really hit the Yorktown. Like the Yorktown seems to be the main target here. They're going after her, and the ship is going to list to one side, but not sink. Still going. Within 30 minutes of this happening, they get the command to abandon ship. It's over.
Yeah, Fletcher's had to move his command staff over to a destroyer at this point.
Yeah, it's been the Yorktown gets banged up pretty bad again. Even though whatever, these guys, it's almost like a second round for them because a month ago at the Coral Sea, they got hit and they're doing everything they could to save the ship. This time, abandon ship. Now there's a guy on board. His name, he's a photographer's mate, second class Bill Roy, and he's filming this attack. And he had this to say about the devastation, quote, "The life rafts are full of wounded and they're sliding under. So we'd pull them up and tie their arms to the life raft. And the most difficult thing, you're in the water, you have Bucker B oil. It's giving off a gas and you can't breathe and you're throwing up or getting sick and it burns your eyes, burns your nose, and you're gulping seawater and field oil," end quote. This is what they're dealing with as they go overboard from the Yorktown.
So real quick, I don't know this guy's name. I watched the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library. They have a lecture online, and we watched it in preparation for this. And one of the quotes that the speaker had was this guy, and again I don't know his name, but it was pretty fascinating because he talked about having to get off the Yorktown after they give the order to abandon ship, and they're going over the side on ropes, these big Navy ropes, these thick ropes. He talks about how you can only hold on about halfway down. You have to let go because it starts burning your hands. He said, but people were coming over so fast, it was one after another. The guys were landing on top of you. Yeah. So he thought he was going to drown right there. Well, he ends up swallowing seawater. He swallows that oil and that gas. He's throwing up. He's viciously sick, but he just keeps swimming. He gets away from the ship as quick as he can. Eventually, he swims so far, he gets so tired that he falls asleep. He's got his life vest on. He just falls asleep in the ocean, bobbing. He said he finally comes to. He wakes up, and he's like 100 yards away from the nearest ship.
Oh, no.
And he's out there by himself. And he thinks, oh, my gosh, I got to get closer. So he starts swimming again as hard as he can back towards these ships.
Nuts, man.
And he gets in closer, and there's these rescue ships coming around, and he gets up to one, and he tries to get on board, and the guy says, hey, we can't take any more. We're full. We'll capsize if we take on any more.
Yeah.
Matt, now imagine being in the water and that being your predicament. I'd be like, dude, let me on the boat, right? I don't weigh that much. Let me hang on to the outside of the boat at least.
Pull me along something.
Right. Don't just leave me here. And this guy, they're the hardest generation, man. This guy instead of like throwing a fit, just goes, are we nearby land anywhere? And the guy in the boat goes, yeah, we're about 3 miles away. And he goes, okay, thinking to himself, I'm going to swim there, right? I'll swim to land. And the guy in the water asks the guy on the boat, well, which way is it? And the guy in the boat goes, that way, straight down.
Straight down to the bottom?
The bottom of the ocean. That's the nearest land. It's the bottom of the ocean. Needless to say, this guy obviously gets rescued eventually. But
it's funny, but also, it's dark, but it's funny at the same time. Right, I can only imagine all these guys covered in oil and just the urgency of the situation. It says that's the closest.
Yeah, 3 miles down. That's the closest. God, just crazy, man.
Yeah, it wouldn't be fun to have to abandon ship. You almost feel like, I don't know if it was today or last when we were talking about Coral Sea, you were talking about how vast and how great the ocean is and how strong it is. But you also have that same mentality when you are on your ship. You probably think or feel at least that your ship is unsinkable because you're in this fleet. You look around and there's just destroyers and other carriers. You probably almost feel invincible. And then when that ship is burning and listing and you got to bail out, like it's a whole nother mindset.
Let's don't forget, you're in the freaking Pacific, warm waters. That means there's sharks everywhere, right?
Yeah. Probably
the
yeah.
USS Indianapolis. You know what I mean? Like that. We know that happens.
That's horrendous. Yeah.
So it's terrifying to think about, dude. Especially not being even in a life raft. You're just in the water with a life vest on. And dude, also the fact of getting off the ship would be terrifying. You know, a destroyer or something like that is pretty, like the deck is high from the water to begin with.
Yeah.
But an aircraft carrier is like multiple stories tall above the water.
If you fall,
So to
that's
have
a
to
long
come
fall.
over the edge of that, sliding down a rope, dude, if you let go of the rope too far, you'll break every bone in your body.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It's terrifying to think about. Abandoning ship would be, I feel like there's very few things in life that probably equate to what abandoning ship feels like. I think even the guys in like the Alamo or the Spartans at Thermopylae, I think that situation feels different than having to abandon ship. Because at least you can fight against what's coming at you in the Alamo and at Thermopylae.
Right.
Like you feel like you can give some back on the way out. Like I can go out with a fight. You're not going out with a fight in the middle of the ocean. There's nothing to fight against. Mother Nature rules, right?
Yeah.
Like you're not doing anything. You're just along for the ride. And you might starve to death. You might die of dehydration. A shark might eat you. You know, you might fall into a part of the ocean that oil is spilled and a fire's caught and burned to death. Like you have no clue how you're going to go. You're just along for the ride.
Yeah, and if your Navy doesn't get you, theirs will.
Right. God, terrifying.
There's
like I think about the one guy from freaking from VT8 that survived. And he's over by the Japanese fleet just bobbing in the water.
Yeah, he's got to like hide. He had like a couch cushion or a seat cushion from his cockpit, and he was using that as like a flotation device, but also to hide.
Crazy, man.
From them because he's got planes flying over, he's got ships going. It's I mean, I guess that would be the greatest show on earth, like to be on the enemy side and you can watch everything that's going on and watch the rest of the attack come in. It's got to be unbelievable to watch.
Think about how he felt when he saw those 3 aircraft carrier get hit, though. That had to feel good. Like, we got him.
Probably can't cheer too loudly.
No.
Can't throw your arms up in the air right there. You got to wait. Amazing how they find them.
Hey guys, just wanted to take a quick second to let you know a little bit more about America Fog of War and what we're trying to do with this channel. See, Brett and I both are Marine Corps combat veterans from the global war on terror. We fought in both Iraq and Afghanistan. We've also had an intense interest in the history of the American warrior. Now, it would be a lie to say that our opinions aren't somewhat biased, but after all of the study, the research, and things that we've seen with our own eyes, we are both confident that the greatest warrior the world has ever known is the American warrior. Whether we're talking about the American patriots that gained our independence from Great Britain, the blue-clad federal troops that won a victory at Gettysburg, or the Marines that raised the flag on Mount Suribachi, all of them have distinguished themselves far and above what's normally expected of a nation's warrior class. Citizen soldiers that have been willing to sacrifice all upon the altar of freedom. And today, that legacy seems somewhat threatened. It is our goal here to continue telling their stories, to uphold their legacy so that they're never forgotten, and that future generations of American warriors have ideals and standards to strive to reach. Thank you for your support, and as always, stay frosty. Well, the Japanese still have that one remaining aircraft carrier, and Admiral Fletcher and Admiral Spruance want that aircraft carrier.
Of course.
Right? We've got 3. Let's get that last one. So aircraft from the Enterprise and now the, shipless aircraft from the Yorktown, right? The orphaned aircraft from the Yorktown
Yep.
are going to launch and attack the Hiryu, this remaining aircraft carrier, the Japanese aircraft carrier. Specifically, it's going to be VS-6 and VB-6. VS scout craft, VB is dive bombers. So VB-6 and VS-6 from the Enterprise and VB-3 from the Yorktown are going to launch and pursue the Hiryu. And at 17:05 military time, which would be 5:05 p.m., they are going to locate the Hiryu. and they are going to smoke that thing. I can't give you a breakdown of how I had it earlier as far as, Japanese zeros and all that, but I will tell you that they come in and within a matter of minutes, they hit it at least 4 times, if not 5 times, with their bombs. And that ship erupts into flames and is sunk.
Amazing.
So in one day, they have sunk all 4 battle aircraft carriers that the Japanese had at the Battle of Midway.
That's unbelievable to say, in the least, that our guys, as new as they were able to just pull this off.
So here's a real question. Sometimes I like to pose questions to myself when I'm researching this stuff.
Yeah.
Kind of helps me find the spine of the story, as Dan Carlin would say. But here's a question. Knowing this outcome, was the sacrifice of Waldron and VB6 and VB8 worth it?
I would probably ask those guys that question, and I bet you they'd all say yeah.
I think they'd say yeah.
I think they'd all say yeah, because it was a different mindset. It was duty before safety.
Well, and you think about this, if those 40 minutes had elapsed, because keep in mind, it takes us a long time to get aircraft in the air. The Japanese are very efficient at it at this point in the war. They would have been able to get aircraft in the air very quickly had they not been interrupted.
Yeah.
Those 40 minutes bought us precious time. Really, without those 40 minutes, you don't get the sinking of the first 3.
Right.
Possibly even the 4th one.
Because you would add all the fighters and stuff into the air already. So, yeah, there's many questions and many variables.
So even though they didn't get a direct hit on a ship, they might have changed the outcome. Well, they did change the outcome of this battle, and subsequently the rest of the war in the Pacific.
Yeah.
Not to say that it wouldn't change in the future.
Right.
By the end of the war, we're producing aircraft carriers at such a rate that the Japanese had no chance.
Oh my gosh, no chance.
But what has happened is we've just expedited that, because the Japanese have just lost 4 of their biggest aircraft carrier, and they're never going to be able to get that back.
Never. Got them running with their tail between their legs.
Right. So from this point on, they're on their heels the rest of the war.
Yeah, good. It's amazing. It had to be that way. But back to the Yorktown. So these guys, there's going to be an effort to salvage this ship, because, like I said before, she's still drifting on her own out, some 50 miles. So they set a plan in place, and that's going to be on the 5th. And then by the 6th, before I get into like the whole how they're going to salvage this thing, I just want to say quickly, on the 5th, so these guys, like anything, they're in full route. Like Japanese are out of here. They're trying to escape. Now, of course, the Americans are going to continue to harass, continue to launch planes, continue to let them have it as much as they can, and force them as far back as possible. June 6th, the day 3 of the final aerial attacks took place from dive bombers from the Enterprise and the Hornet, and they're going to inflict heavy damage on the Japanese fleet, cruisers, in particular heavy cruiser Mikuma, and damaging 3 other ships. Now, in the meantime, I mentioned before, photographer's mate, 2nd class Bill Roy, he's going to get a chance to get back on the ship. Now, what they do to salvage this thing is they take the USS Haman. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. And they're going to tie this ship to the starboard side of the Yorktown. So now they're both together, and this will provide electricity and pumps and everything to get the water out of this thing while the guys get back in and try to fix the boilers and get this ship back in motion. Now, Bill Roy, he's part of that crew, and he gets back on, and he was aboard the Yorktown when just the unthinkable happens. We got the whole Japanese Navy on the run, but now we got other problems. There's still other problems going on. So he's working on the starboard side, on the high side, at where the Haman was, and Bill Roy said this. This is what he said, quote, "The Haman exploded right in front of me, broke the Haman in 2 right under the bridge. When it sank, the 18 depth charges went down to their depth and exploded. And now it picks up the Yorktown, 27,000 tons, shakes it stem to stern, rocks it, and rolls it. People are blown overboard from the first torpedo hit under the Haman. We took 2 on the starboard side." So a Japanese submarine came in and hit the Haman that was tied to the Yorktown while they're in there working on it and just
leveled it, and then
leveled
hits
that.
the Yorktown twice more.
Yes. So even more. So she's hit. So of course at this time, all efforts to save the Yorktown are abandoned naturally. And by the next morning on the 7th, the Yorktown, early in the morning, she rolls to her port side and slips beneath the waves.
Well, what's kind of something to point out, because it's an emotional moment for the Americans there. The Yorktown is,
everybody can see it.
Well, and it's a big deal, right? That ship is a big deal. It's participated in the Battle of Coral Sea, and now this battle, these two epic naval battles, and it's going down. So the entire task force lines up its ships. Flags are at half mast. Everybody's in their uniforms with their hats off. They all salute and watch the ship go down.
Yeah.
So imagine just being on deck for that experience. After this major battle where you've lost so many guys, and now you're watching, the mechanical embodiment of those guys go under the water. Right? It's it'd be crazy to see.
That's how they started their morning on the last day.
But that marks the end of the battle.
Yeah.
So let's just talk numbers wise here a little bit. Going into the battle, the U.S. had 3 carriers. The Japanese had 4. Coming out of the battle, we lost 1 carrier. The Japanese lost all 4.
Ouch.
Going into the battle, we had 15 destroyers and they had 12 destroyers, each side losing 1. Going into the battle, the U.S. had 360 aircraft. The Japanese had 276. This is bananas. Coming out of the battle, we lost 150. The Japanese lost 248. They lost 248 of their 276 aircraft.
That's going to be close to 90%.
And they're never going to be able to replenish that.
No.
Or the trained pilots that were flying those aircraft.
Yeah.
Which gets me to my last statistic here. Personnel-wise, the U.S. takes 307 casualties. The Japanese take 3,057 casualties.
Wowzers.
Yeah. So, an astronomical defeat for the Japanese, a master class win for the Americans. Yeah, I'd say so. And what is so interesting about this battle, because it vividly paints this picture, is how important all the different aspects are to a success on the battlefield. You don't have any success unless you have the guys at Hawaii at the hypo station deciphering the Japanese code and then making educated decisions based on that code breaking. You don't have any success if Admiral Nimitz doesn't take their word for it.
Right.
You don't have any success if the Waldron and the guys from VT8 and VT6, if they don't make their sacrifice.
Takes everybody.
You don't have any success if Fletcher doesn't command his guys to stick around and wait until they're in a cohesive flight formation before they attack the target. You don't have the same level of success if Lieutenant Best and his 2 co-pilots don't break off and hit the Akagi. Right? So it's like it's one thing after another. All of the pieces are playing. You don't find the Japanese fleet unless the recon planes from Wake Island locate the Japanese fleet.
Yeah, there's so many.
There's so many things that play into it. That's why you hear so often, time and time again, that luck plays such a big role on the battlefield, right? Like you have to train, you have to be prepared, you have to be well equipped, and you have to be ready to do the job, and you have to make the right decision. But luck also, all those things coming together, how can you not see luck or some kind of divine intervention in that process, right? It's hard not to come away with thinking that there was a higher power at work there.
Yeah.
Right? Or at least extreme levels of luck. And from this point on, the Japanese never go on the offensive again.
That's incredible.
They're solely on the defensive the rest of the war.
Yes. Yes.
And this marks the start of our offensive, with our first offensive campaign being launched into the Solomon Islands with the famous Battle of Guadalcanal, which we're going to be covering next time.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot coming because, like anything, we're still early in the Pacific Theater. And this, we're only 6 months after Pearl Harbor. And what a major turn.
What a major turn. And think about this. It only took us 6 months to essentially put the most dominant Navy in the world
Yeah.
on their heels. And really, it took us 6 months to not just even the playing field, but to make it to where we had the dominant leverage on the battlefield, at least from, a naval aspect for the rest of the war. Because the Japanese are never going to be able to catch up. Already we're putting out ships at a very high rate.
Yeah.
The fact that they were able to turn the Yorktown around in 3 days is mind-blowing enough. But when you start getting the statistics of how, especially by 1944 and 1945, what did you tell me the other day? We're putting out a carrier at how often are we putting a carrier out?
Actually, it was by that following year, by 1943, it was one every month.
An aircraft carrier every month.
Fully operational. Go.
And big aircraft carriers, too. Not like light ones, big ones.
Yeah, there was something like 90 of them.
Can you imagine how many aircraft are we? Because what was the B-17 fact that we gave out a few episodes ago? They're churning out B-17s at some kind of crazy rate, like one every 2 or 3 hours or something.
It was 100 minutes. It was like an hour, just over an hour and a half.
As a B-17 done and made.
Yeah.
That's a B-17. Think about how quickly they're putting out Wildcats and Corsairs and all, dude.
Yeah, much smaller planes.
They can't compete with that. Not to mention the fact, population-wise, we're training new pilots at such a rapid rate and getting them into the fleet and getting them into combat. The Japanese can't keep up with that.
Unbelievable, man. Like the difference in the capabilities and the manufacturing and the people and the men,
wartime industry, dude.
The men and women that are, you crank all this stuff out quick enough. Well, you got to fly that plane now to the West Coast or the East Coast to get it to where it needs to be, and it's just going and going and going nonstop. Incredible how it just took off.
It really is.
Literally.
Nimitz obviously deserves a lot of praise for acting on this intelligence. Jack Fletcher, the commander in charge of both task forces, he gets overlooked a lot because Spruance, which I haven't actually found out why Spruance gets so much love. I have to think that it's because he sends his torpedo bombers off piecemeal for that 40-minute window. Spruance obviously deserves a lot of praise for getting his men into the fight right away.
Sure.
But Fletcher's the one that gave the order. Fletcher deserves a lot of praise for this battle as well. You don't see your enemy in a naval battle like this.
Oh, no.
You're doing this all based on hunches and hearsay. And he's risking a lot of things in this battle. And to have the guts to be able to, and the confidence in his men and his ability to be able to say, we're launching now, let's go.
Yeah.
And then come away with the win, man.
The big win.
That's a big deal.
Grand Slam.
Especially especially on the heels of the Coral Sea. Because that wasn't really a win for the U.S. It was a tactical win for the Japanese.
Yeah. It's a big difference. Just a month apart. But it set the tone, man.
It sets the tone, and things will never be the same in the Pacific again.
Yeah, not until that Japanese surrender in 1945. They're going to keep going, but it's going to be very difficult. It's not as easy as it sounds, but there'll be other issues too. But man,
there's more. There's trying times ahead. We still have the naval battles of Guadalcanal to go over.
Yeah,
and Lord knows that's not going to be great for the U.S. But things are different now.
Yeah. That
confidence has shifted. The Japanese no longer hold the confidence in the region anymore.
Right.
It's in the U.S.'s pocket now.
For sure.
So, man, it was fun. It was a good time.
Yeah, it was fun.
Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed what you heard and you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please make sure you subscribe and leave us a 5-star review. It really helps us a lot. If you're watching on YouTube, please make sure you subscribe, hit that notification bell, give us a like. Leave us a comment. Tell us what you liked about the show. Ask questions. We'll do some more research if we don't know the answer and try to answer them as best we can. Thank you so much for tuning in. And if you really enjoy the show and you're trying to find a way to help us out even more, consider joining our Patreon. It's $5 a month, very affordable. You get early access, ad-free access to all of our episodes, on top of numerous other things. We do things. Oftentimes, we'll make short docs or we'll have little short conversations that we try to put up on our Patreon just for our patrons to have. And you have direct access to us. You can message us anytime you want, and we communicate with all of our patrons. And it's just a way that you can help contribute to the show and help, get our message out there to more people. So thank you so much. any way you listen. We appreciate it. And until next time, stay frosty.